You're listening to Inside iOS Dev, a show about real-world iOS development, here with your host, Andrew Rohn.
And Alex Bush.
And today we have a special guest episode. Today we have a special guest, Julian Faher. Julian?
Hey, hi guys, how's it going? Thanks for having me here again.
Yes, and we're going to have a special debate, kind of freestyle language, talking about programming languages battle. And Julian and Alex are going to be debating, so I'm interested to hear what they're going to say. Hope you guys enjoy.
All right. Your mama jokes. Sorry. Let me start with another one, though. JavaScript. I don't like it.
Lay it out there. Boom.
I don't like it a lot.
Surprise, surprise.
It's a very, very weird language with a lot of quirks.
I agree. I personally have a very, weird relationship with JavaScript, and I don't find it as awful as I used to find it. And I think what changed it for me is that I heard Douglas Crawford saying that JavaScript is the only language that people think they can develop in without learning it.
Okay, dude. I have something. Yes, so I have a point there. Okay, think about it this way. So, like, you work with Ruby, right? You work with Perl, and I think, right? And similar languages, objective-oriented languages. And me as well, right? I worked with Ruby, I worked with Objective-C and like Swift, Java, right? All of those languages, in a nutshell, if you think about it, they are very similar. They are super close to each other in a way that they are general-purpose languages. They kind of accomplish features they have and the solutions and the way you accomplish things with them similar in a sense that it's objective-oriented way of solving problems. And I can tell that right now, like, for example, you would have to work with Python for whatever reason. You could do it right now. Go ahead and write some Python code with your background, with your experience, without learning it, and you'll still do well, and you'll be able to kind of accomplish things, given that, you didn't learn it really. Obviously, it's not going to be a perfect Python code, but you'll get job done, and it will be decent enough because the concepts and the approach you'll be following is general OOP and solid principles. And JavaScript does not let you do that.
Boom.
Yeah, I guess that's fair, that if you know one paradigm and you learn another language in the same paradigm, it's easy. I think the misunderstanding here that JavaScript is similar to certain paradigms, I know, people know, but it's still different. And there's a lot of people arguing that you should not write object-oriented JavaScript, you should write functional JavaScript. And I guess what annoys you is the fact that you don't have it, at least in the older version of JavaScript, you don't have real classes and all like the private public stuff we know, and it's prototype based. And
maybe not necessarily classes, because I don't really care about inheritance, right? Quite often it's actually, you shoot yourself in the foot with that, but rather interfaces of things. And yes, private, public declaration of properties and methods on an object. And for God's sake, you guys have objects, please use them.
I just want to jump in really quick. What is the difference? How is a prototype different than a class? I have no idea. Like you just mentioned prototypes in JavaScript.
It's going to be hard for me to explain the difference. In a class, say like in a language like Java or Ruby, you define a class by describing its method and fields. And then you can create instances of those classes. And each instance has exactly those fields and those methods. And in the prototype-based language, you just create objects. And those objects have methods and fields, and they're all different. They don't follow a certain pattern. And I guess they do follow a certain pattern. They are all based on a prototype.
It sounds like a glorified dictionary to me, basically. Like you could just stick things in there, including methods.
Yeah, that's true.
So isn't that like just, it seems like very messy to me. Like it seems dangerous. It seems like we developed this whole class object oriented thing to protect from things like that. Like that was a whole development of it, and now we're moving away from it. It seems like not good. Just my intuition.
I guess that's a pretty bold statement to say we need that to protect us, and the only thing is good, the other thing is bad. It's just different, and we learned it one way, and we're trying to apply this one way we learned it to another thing. It just doesn't work because it's different. And instead of learning how to like deal with it and use it the correct way, we just complain about it.
But Julian, though, I get that, but then the restrictions are not necessary when you know what you're doing and you have experience. And the problem with a lot of developers, not just JavaScript, but and JavaScript as well, and then the whole software industry, is that we're in the perpetual state of inexperience. Every 5 years, number of developers who have less than 5 years of experience doubles. Therefore, there are not that many old timers who know how to do it and are very careful with those, glorified dictionaries.
Yes, and to that point, I'm a beginner. I'm still learning. I want the kind of safety rails there. I feel like it's helping me. It makes my code better. I don't want to have some Wild West thing. I think it's nice, right?
Okay.
As a quick example, again, exactly what Andrew said. When I'm working with him, right? Let's say I'm creating one part of the system and an object that he's gonna use. I need to express in the code and let him know that those are the public things that he can use, methods and instance variables, and those others are private, and he cannot and should not and cannot touch them.
I guess there was a lot of statements, and I think I have a lot of answers or counter statements. So when it comes to your last statement with like referring to private, public, and having clear interfaces, JavaScript doesn't enforce them, but there is a convention, and the convention, I think, is you start a method with an underscore. It is private. Don't use it. It's used internally. The same with fields. But to see that a little bit more holistically, when I now look at code that I wrote a year ago, I think it's shitty. And if I will look at code that I write now in a year, I will think that code is shitty. We all learn. Software isn't perfect. We have not mastered software at all. I would say that software is probably the most complex thing that humans created. And we're in it way above our head. How do you say that?
We're in above our heads.
We're in above our heads. And I think part of the learning process is to make mistakes and make errors. And if you want to learn to ride a bike, you get on a bike and you fall, and that's how you learn to balance it. You don't get on a static bike and learn how to push the pedals. That's not biking. Biking is being balanced and pushing the pedals, and the same with developing.
Right. So with that analogy, with the bike analogy, the very, I don't know, programming in the 60s or whatever, in the 70s, and when it was just starting, they had probably the crudest of bikes. Like they started with probably the one wheel bike, that weird old school one, and they realized, oh, it's a little weird. Like it's hard to get on, right? And then so now they've developed more modern bikes, and there's reason and there's engineering reason and knowledge for why the bikes ended up in the form we see them today. And the same thing with languages. They ended up in the form they are today because we are learning from earlier people who got on these crude bikes, fell off of them, got injured, and they came up with these standards and these languages and these conventions because, they learned that was better. So why are I feel like it's like we're giving that up in a way, right?
I would not say they are better in general. We invented them because we're trying to solve problems, and they were easier solvable with a certain paradigm. For example, object-oriented. For example, stateful stuff is easy to solve if you have objects. Parallelism is easier to solve if you are in a functional language because you are stateless. And then there's all those hybrids where you have both. And I think each paradigm is made for a very specific use case, and we should not lock ourselves down to glorifying one of them. We should be open to all of them. And in fact, a lot of stuff we invented way back decades ago is now all of a sudden coming back because we're solving different kind of problems. And turns out those languages are ideal to solve, or those paradigms are ideal to solve that specific type of problem.
Actually, a great point. Yeah, I agree. The like functional programming specifically, but as a one of those alternatives, right? But again, from my experience, what I kind of realized at some point, I've done. Originally, I was doing a lot of objective-oriented programming, but eventually I got to functional reactive programming on iOS, and that is in the name. Yeah, it's functional reactive, but effectively, what it becomes, it's not one or another. It's not either objective-oriented or functional. The solution is kind of golden middle in between when you use both, right? You have your, for example, you could have your immutable objects with pure function methods on them, right? And that way you get kind of the best from both worlds. And that's where I see the problem with like JavaScript code, where they cran and lean more towards like functional way, but then it's without this type safety of any kind. It becomes like this Wild West, right? But then again, they do have objects that they could leverage as well, kind of doing both things, objective and functional. But
so to defend JavaScript a little bit more here, if you think about the fact it was designed in, I think, like 30 or 60 days, and it was initially designed to be a Lisp-like language, and then Netscape came and said like, yo, make this look more like Java. Java is the hard thing right now. And now we have this thing that was intended to be A, made look like B, and still now we use it like C because people came up with using it on the back end and having like I/O being asynchronous in general and use callbacks, and it's incredible fast and people do incredible stuff with it. I think we need to start to see software more like a tool and not like a solution to a problem. If you buy a hammer, you don't expect the hammer to automatically nail the wall, to automatically hit the nail for you. You just use the hammer, but you hit the nail yourself, and you choose the right size hammer for the corresponding nail. And I think that's how we need to look at software, not expecting programming language to solve all our problems and all our needs. It's our responsibility. We as developers have to get better, not the languages.
That's a good point, Julian, and I definitely agree. And as an example of that happening, where you have a hammer and you probably need a scalpel instead or something, would be, in my opinion, right? We'll see how it plays out down the road, but right now, in my opinion, using Swift on this backend side for server development, I do not think that Swift was made for that. I know it's a general purpose language, just like Ruby or Python or whatever else, but it feels better suited and crafted for client-side development.
Interesting. Could you give me some examples why?
I honestly, actually, I would think the type safety, which is, I am in favor, right? But then I guess I'm a bit biased coming from Rails experience, but on the back end where you have to work with most of the time with relational databases, you need something more flexible that has more metaprogramming capacity to kind of to work with that, where Ruby shines, for example, right? And Swift is too strict, right? We don't have real advanced reflection yet.
That's a very interesting statement, and I think it kind of conflicts with what you said earlier, that you want JavaScript to be responsible for developers not making mistakes, but on the other way, your experience in backend stuff, so you want the language to not hold you back.
Nice. That's a good one.
So I get it, and I'm a Rubyist. I love Ruby, and I would probably not trade Ruby for Java in most projects, but I think there is definitely stuff where I would not use Ruby for if it comes, for example, to develop a system for a bank where I want type safety. I want the language to be strict. I want to get errors at compile time and not ship it out in an agile fashion like, whoops.
Right. And in this similar fashion, you could use Ruby right now for iOS development. That's called Ruby Motion.
Yeah.
I would never. I played with it. I would never do that because it's. I mean, you could. It's kind of nice, but then that is not made for that. Like you need some compile step there for the client side.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it too much, but it looked kind of weird. All the like things you had to do to work around certain restrictions. How I wanted to ask a question. How do you? I guess the reason why people want to do Swift on the back end is they only want to learn one language, and then they have like this Swiss Army knife where they can do anything, and it's cool because
JavaScript.
Precisely. Yeah, I was about to say.
I guess it's kind of cool because as a one-man army, you can all of a sudden have this mighty system. You can like prototype super quick and like push stuff out without learning more. What's your point on that?
Well, I guess that's exactly the thing there. In my opinion, and we kind of spoke about it in another episode. Like you should be a generalist, and you should be able to change hats and switch languages fast and easy. And it should be second nature for you to like quickly pick up and learn a new thing, right? Instead of, again, having a hammer that you really know well and everything's like a nail, but god damn it, you need a precise scalpel in some scenarios, right? So learn how to use the goddamn scalpel.
I agree. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Okay, guys. Hope you enjoyed this episode. It was just kind of a little more freewheeling discussion. These are actually kind of the discussions that we just have just kind of when we're together, not like recording, just like, when we're just hanging out. So we wanted to try and record that. I think we can all agree at the end of the day, though, that we're having these discussions because we want to become better programmers. I think at the end of the day, we can agree that being like some fanatic about one particular language or one particular paradigm is blinding, and if you're not open-minded enough, you're not going to be flexible and open to other solutions, and kind of be blinded to other better ways of solving the problem. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this conversation. Julian, did you have any closing words?
I have an amazing analogy here. So if you want to build a house, you learn how to be a carpenter. Like, say you learn how to be a carpenter, you're not all of a sudden going to build a whole skyscraper yourself. You still learn a lot of other skills on the way. And I think people these days, they want to start out building a skyscraper, but that's not how you learn development. You learn development step by step, and you learn one skill, and you put another skill on top, and another one, and another one. And at the end, you become a specialist with a very specific skill, but you have all those other skills that support them.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. And then you also have your own kind of things going on. Did you want to tell our listeners about that?
I'm currently in the process of putting out screencasts about mostly backend development, Docker, caching, all that fun stuff. Check out codetails.io for more information.
Okay, codetails.io, guys. Check it out. Thanks so much for listening. Take care.
Bye.